Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that touches all of our lives, attachment and the surprising power of letting go. If you've ever found yourself gripping tightly to something, a relationship, an outcome, a possession, even an identity, and felt the anxiety that comes with that grip, then I promise this video will offer you something valuable. So before you're tempted to skip ahead, give me just 2 minutes to show you why the ancient wisdom we're about to explore might be exactly what you need right now. In a world constantly telling us to chase more, have more, be more, there's profound freedom in the counterintuitive approach of letting go. The ancient Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago, and their insights have never been more relevant than in our attachment-heavy modern lives. This isn't about giving up or checking out from life. Quite the opposite. As we'll discover, learning what to release your grip on is actually one of the most empowering moves you can make. It's not retreat, it's strategic advancement. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious about the future, or just tired of the emotional roller coaster that comes from tying your well-being to things outside your control, stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll have practical wisdom from some of history's greatest minds on how to maintain inner strength regardless of external circumstances. The Stoic Foundation. Understanding what we control. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. These words from Epictetus form the bedrock of Stoic philosophy, and they reveal the first crucial insight about attachment. Much of our suffering comes from trying to control what is fundamentally not ours to control. Think about it. How much mental energy do you spend worrying about things entirely outside your influence? The weather on your wedding day, other people's opinions, the traffic during your commute, the economy, global events, past mistakes that can't be undone. The Stoics proposed a radical shift in perspective. They suggested we clearly distinguish between what is up to us and what is not up to us. As Epictetus put it in his Enchiridion, some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This distinction is simple to understand but revolutionary to apply. When we truly internalize it, we stop the exhausting practice of pouring our emotional energy into situations we cannot influence. Instead, we focus that same energy on the one thing we always have some control over, our own responses. Now, I already know what some of you might be thinking. Isn't this just accepting defeat? Just letting life happen to you? That's a common misunderstanding about Stoicism, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Letting go is not giving up. Letting go of attachment to outcomes doesn't mean you stop taking action or pursuing goals. The Stoics were not passive observers of life. They were engaged citizens, leaders, and creators who valued purposeful action. The key difference is in the emotional attachment to specific results. When we become fixated on particular outcomes, we set ourselves up for potential disappointment, anxiety, and frustration. We make our peace of mind contingent on factors we cannot fully control. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This perspective transforms how we approach challenges. Instead of thinking, "I must get this specific result or I've failed," the Stoic approach suggests, "I will give my best effort while accepting that the final outcome involves factors beyond my control." Consider an example we can all relate to: a job interview. The conventional approach might have us fixating on getting the offer, rehearsing our answers endlessly, and then riding an emotional roller coaster as we wait for the decision. The Stoic approach would have us prepare thoroughly, controlling what we can, present ourselves authentically, and then let go of the outcome, recognizing that the hiring decision involves countless factors beyond our influence. Does this mean Stoics don't care about results? Not at all. They simply recognize that attaching their self-worth and emotional state to specific outcomes is a recipe for unnecessary suffering. As Seneca advised, set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" This practice of periodically living with less helps break the psychological dependency on comfort and specific conditions for happiness. It reminds us that we can be okay even when things don't go as planned. The hidden cost of attachment. Let's talk about what attachment really costs us, because understanding this is crucial to seeing why letting go is truly a power move. When we're attached to specific outcomes, possessions, or even people being a certain way, we create rigid conditions for our happiness. We essentially tell ourselves, "I can only be content if X happens," or "My well-being depends on person Y behaving exactly as I want." This conditional approach to happiness makes us vulnerable. It places the keys to our emotional state in external circumstances rather than keeping them in our own hands. Beyond the emotional toll, attachment also clouds our judgment. When we desperately want something to be true or to happen, we often miss important information that contradicts our desired narrative. How many times have you or someone you know stayed in a situation that wasn't working, a job, a relationship, a project, simply because of attachment to the idea of what it could or should be? There's also the opportunity cost. Energy spent. Clinging to what we can't control is energy we can't invest in what we can. Time spent ruminating over unchangeable past events is time we could use to shape our present. The Stoics understood this clearly. Epictetus, who spent part of his life as a slave before becoming a respected philosopher, knew well the difference between real imprisonment and the self-imposed prisons of attachment. He taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This doesn't mean becoming emotionally detached from life. Rather, it means engaging fully while holding our attachments lightly. Strategic detachment, the Stoic practice of premeditatio. Malorum, one of the most powerful Stoic techniques for loosening our grip on attachments, is what they called premeditatio. Malorum, the premeditation of evils. Far from being pessimistic, this practice is actually about cultivating resilience and perspective. Here's how it works. Regularly take time to imagine losing things you value: your job, your home, your health, even loved ones. This isn't to indulge in fear or morbid thoughts, but rather to mentally rehearse facing these difficulties with equanimity. Seneca explained the value of this practice. He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. By contemplating potential losses in advance, we reduce their ability to devastate us if they actually occur. This practice also helps us appreciate what we have right now. When we acknowledge that nothing is permanent, not our possessions, our health, our relationships, or even our lives, we can value them more deeply in the present moment. I've personally found this to be one of the most transformative aspects of Stoic philosophy. When I take a few minutes to consider that my loved ones won't be here forever, it doesn't make me sad or anxious. Instead, it cuts through the triviality of small annoyances and reminds me to value the time we have. The Stoics even recommended a daily practice of contemplating your own mortality, not to be morbid, but to sharpen your focus on living well today. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." But doesn't all this contemplation of loss make life depressing? Actually, practitioners find the opposite to be true. By facing our fears directly and accepting the impermanence of all things, we free ourselves from the anxiety of trying to control the uncontrollable. Attachment to opinions. The hidden burden now. Let's talk about something we rarely recognize. As an attachment, our opinions and beliefs. This might be the most subtle yet powerful form of attachment we experience. We humans tend to identify strongly with our viewpoints. We feel personally attacked when our ideas are challenged. We cling to beliefs long after evidence contradicts them. We let our political, religious, or philosophical positions become part of our identity. The Stoics recognize this as another form of attachment that can cause suffering. Marcus Aurelius advised, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed. It is the person who continues in his self-deception and ignorance who is harmed." This openness to being wrong, this willingness to let go of the attachment to being right, is remarkably rare, yet it's a source of tremendous power and growth. Think about times you've been in arguments where both sides become increasingly entrenched. The attachment to winning or being right completely blocks any possibility of learning or connection. Now contrast that with discussions where people hold their views provisionally, willing to update when presented with new information. The difference is striking, isn't it? The latter approach leads to genuine progress and understanding. The former leads to stagnation disguised as certainty. Epictetus put it bluntly, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." By letting go of our attachment to being right, we open ourselves to genuine learning. This doesn't mean becoming wishy-washy or abandoning principles. The Stoics were people of strong values, but they distinguished between holding values and being rigidly attached to specific expressions of those values. I found this particularly relevant in today's polarized climate. When we can advocate for our positions while remaining open to correction and nuance, we model a better way of engaging with differences. We create space for actual dialogue rather than parallel monologues. The paradox, greater influence through letting go here. We come to what might seem like a paradox. By letting go of our attachment to controlling outcomes, we often gain more real influence, not less. Think about the people who have most influenced your life. Chances are they weren't the ones who tried to control you or manipulate outcomes. More likely, they were people who embodied certain qualities and values that inspired you to change voluntarily. The Stoics understood this principle of influence. They knew that attempting to control others directly often creates resistance, while modeling virtue ourselves can inspire change naturally. Epictetus captured this when he said, "Make it your business to draw out the best in others by being an exemplar yourself." This is influence without attachment, showing a better way without being fixated on whether others follow it. We see this principle at work in many contexts. The most effective leaders don't micromanage. They create conditions for others to excel and then trust the process. The most impactful teachers don't force learning. They spark curiosity and create supportive environments for discovery. Even in personal relationships, letting go of the need to control others paradoxically creates healthier dynamics. When we accept others as they are, rather than as we wish them to be, we create space for authentic connection and natural growth. This approach to influence requires patience and trust. Patience to allow change to unfold at its own pace, and trust that focusing on what's in our control will eventually bear fruit. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up about things you can't control. These things are not asking to be judged by you. Leave them alone." By releasing our grip on specific outcomes, we conserve energy for effective action. By accepting what we cannot change, we gain clarity about what we can. This is the paradoxical power of letting go. Practical applications, Stoic exercises for letting go. So how do we actually practice this art of letting go? The Stoics left us several practical exercises that remain remarkably effective today. First is the practice of negative visualization we touched on earlier. Take a few minutes each day to imagine losing something you value. How would you respond? What resources would you draw on? This mental rehearsal builds resilience while loosening attachment. Second is the dichotomy of control exercise. When facing a challenging situation, explicitly identify what aspects are within your control and which aren't. Then consciously focus your energy only on the former. This simple practice can cut anxiety dramatically. Epictetus taught his students, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This means giving your best effort to what you can influence, while accepting with equanimity what you cannot. A third practice is voluntary discomfort. Periodically, choose to go without certain comforts. Skip a meal, take a cold shower, sleep on the floor, or dress simply. This breaks the psychological dependency on specific conditions for your well-being. Seneca, despite being one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly practiced living with less. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content, with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared? Fourth is the view from above. Imagine stepping back and viewing your concerns from a cosmic perspective. Many of our attachments appear trivial when seen in the context of humanity's full history or the vastness of the universe. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself, soon you will have forgotten the world, and soon the world will have forgotten you. This cosmic perspective helps loosen our grip on temporary concerns. Finally, there's the practice of mindful attention to the present moment. When we're fully engaged with what's actually happening now, rather than lost in regrets about the past or anxieties about the future, many of our attachments lose their power. Seneca observed, true happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient. These practices aren't meant to be done once and forgotten. They're tools for regular use, mental exercises that, like physical ones, build strength through consistent application. Letting go in relationships. A Stoic approach. Now, let's talk about one of the most challenging areas to apply these principles, our relationships with others. Relationship attachments are particularly tricky because caring about others is natural and good. The Stoics never suggested emotional detachment from people we love. Rather, they advocated for loving others while accepting the reality that we cannot control them. Epictetus offered this perspective. Remember that you are an actor in a play, which is as the playwright wants it to be, short if he wants it short, long if he wants it long. If he wants you to play a beggar, play even this role skillfully, or a cripple, or a public official, or a private citizen. What is yours is to play the assigned role well, but to choose it belongs to someone else. In modern terms, we might say, love people without trying to direct their lives. Support them without trying to control their choices. Be fully present without creating dependencies. This is particularly relevant when we consider how attachment manifests in relationships. We become attached to having people behave in certain ways. We create expectations about how loved ones should act, speak, or feel. When they deviate from these expectations, we feel hurt or angry, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they've violated our internal script. A Stoic approach would have us examine these expectations and ask, am I loving this person? as they are, or am I loving my idea of who they should be? Letting go in relationships doesn't mean caring less. It means loving more freely, without the constraints of expectation and control. It means supporting others' growth, even when it takes them in directions different from what we might have chosen. This approach creates space for authentic connection. When others sense that our love doesn't come with conditions, that we're not trying to mold them into versions that better suit our preferences, trust deepens. Paradoxically, by letting go of trying to control the relationship often strengthens. Marcus Aurelius suggested this perspective. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, and so none of them can hurt me. This isn't cynicism. It's a recognition that others act according to their own understanding, just as we do. By accepting this reality, we free ourselves from the futile attempt to make others conform to our expectations. Letting go of the past, Stoic guidance for moving forward. Another challenging area for many of us is letting go of the past, particularly past mistakes, regrets, and grudges. Here too, Stoic wisdom offers practical guidance. The Stoics recognize that the past is definitively beyond our control. No amount of rumination can change what has already occurred, yet many of us spend countless hours mentally revisiting past events, wishing they had gone differently. Seneca addressed this directly. Two elements must therefore be rooted out once for all: the fear of future suffering and the recollection of past suffering, since the latter no longer concerns me and the former concerns me not yet. This doesn't mean ignoring lessons from the past. The Stoics valued learning from experience. But there's a crucial difference between extracting useful lessons and dwelling on unchangeable events. For mistakes we've made, the Stoic approach is refreshingly practical. Acknowledge the error, identify the lesson, make amends where possible, and then focus on acting better now. Continuing to berate yourself after this process adds nothing valuable. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't be ashamed of needing help. You have a duty to fulfill, just like a soldier on the wall of battle. So what if you are injured and can't climb up without another soldier's help?" For harms done to us by others, the Stoics advocated a similar approach. Recognize what happened. Protect yourself from future harm if necessary, but don't keep the injury alive through resentment and grudges. Epictetus put it powerfully. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. In modern psychology, this parallels the insight that our distress often comes not from events themselves, but from the stories we tell about those events. By changing our narrative or letting go of it entirely, we reclaim our emotional freedom. This doesn't mean minimizing genuine trauma or serious harm. The Stoics understood that some experiences leave deep wounds, but even then, they would suggest that our healing lies not in remaining attached to the injury through resentment, but in processing it and refocusing on what is within our control now. I find this approach particularly powerful for breaking cycles of rumination. When I catch myself mentally replaying past scenarios, I ask, what useful lesson can I extract here? What is within my control now? This redirects my energy from the unchangeable past to the actionable present. Letting go of future anxieties. The Stoic antidote to worry: just as attachment to the past causes suffering, so does excessive attachment to specific visions of the future. Many of us become fixated on particular outcomes, creating detailed mental pictures of how things should unfold. When reality inevitably deviates from these scripts, we experience distress. The Stoics proposed a more resilient approach. Work diligently toward preferred outcomes while maintaining flexible expectations about what might actually occur. Seneca advised, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." This insight speaks directly to our tendency to create elaborate worst-case scenarios that rarely materialize. The Stoic antidote isn't positive thinking or forced optimism. It's a clear-eyed acceptance of uncertainty coupled with confidence in our ability to respond effectively to whatever happens. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This shifts focus from trying to control external events to developing our internal resources for handling whatever occurs. One practical approach is to distinguish between productive planning and unproductive worrying. Planning identifies specific actions we can take and focuses on executing them. Worrying, by contrast, often involves ruminating on circumstances beyond our control without generating actionable steps. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason, which today arm you against the present." This perspective acknowledges future challenges without allowing them to diminish our present peace. When we let go of rigid expectations about how the future must unfold, we gain adaptability. We can respond creatively to circumstances as they actually develop, rather than wasting energy lamenting deviations from our predetermined script. This doesn't mean abandoning goals or aspirations. The Stoics valued purposeful action, but they recognized that attachment to specific outcomes creates unnecessary suffering and actually impedes effective performance. Think of the athlete who performs best when focused on executing in the moment rather than fixating on the final score. Or the entrepreneur who can pivot in response to market feedback rather than clinging to their original vision. This combination of directed effort and flexible attachment exemplifies the Stoic approach. The ultimate test: letting go of control. All of the Stoic practices we've discussed ultimately point toward one central challenge: letting go of our fundamental attachment to control. This might be our most deeply rooted attachment. We want certainty in an uncertain world. We want guarantees in a reality that offers none. We want to eliminate risk in a life that is inherently unpredictable. The Stoics recognize this desire as both natural and futile. Instead of promising false certainty, they offered something more valuable: resilience in the face of uncertainty. Epictetus, who experienced slavery, disability, and exile, still maintained, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This isn't resignation. It's strategic focus on what actually matters. When we let go of the attachment to controlling what cannot be controlled, several remarkable things happen. First, our anxiety decreases. Much of our mental suffering comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. When we stop fighting this fundamental reality, we experience genuine relief. Second, our effectiveness increases. Energy previously wasted on futile attempts to control the uncontrollable becomes available for meaningful action within our sphere of influence. Third, we become more present. When we're not constantly projecting into the future or rehashing the past, we can engage fully with what's actually happening now. Fourth, we develop greater resilience. By practicing acceptance of changing circumstances, we build the mental muscles needed to navigate life's inevitable challenges. Finally, we discover a deeper kind of freedom. As Epictetus observed, freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. By letting go of the demand that reality conform to our preferences, we free ourselves from the tyranny of disappointment. This brings us to what might be the most counterintuitive Stoic insight. True power comes not from expanding our control, but from focusing it precisely on what matters most: our own choices, judgments, and actions. Modern applications. Stoicism in today's world. The principles we've explored are over 2,000 years old, yet they feel remarkably relevant to our modern challenges. Let's consider a few contemporary applications. In our digital age, information overload creates constant opportunities for attachment. We become attached to staying current with news, social media, and work communications. The Stoic practice of distinguishing between what we can and cannot control offers a powerful filter. Which of these information streams truly merit my attention? Which actually fall within my sphere of influence? In our achievement-oriented culture, many of us become attached to external markers of success, wealth, status, recognition. The Stoics would have us question whether these attachments actually serve our well-being. As Seneca noted, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. In our polarized political climate, attachment to particular viewpoints often prevents productive dialogue. The Stoic willingness to hold opinions provisionally offers a path forward. We can advocate for our positions while remaining open to correction and nuance. In our personally branded world, many of us become attached to particular identities and self-images. The Stoic emphasis on character over reputation provides a healthier foundation. Focus on being good rather than looking good. Even in our approach to physical and mental health, Stoic principles offer valuable guidance. The practice of voluntary discomfort builds resilience against both physical and psychological challenges. The focus on what we can control helps distinguish between productive health practices and futile worrying. Personal reflection. My journey with letting go. I'd like to share a bit about my own experience applying these principles, because theory only gets us so far. The real test comes in how these ideas function in everyday life. Several years ago, I found myself in a situation many of you might relate to. I had built detailed plans for my career, relationships, and lifestyle. A precise vision of how my life should unfold. When reality deviated significantly from this script, I experienced tremendous distress. A health challenge forced me to step back from work I identified with strongly. A relationship ended despite my best efforts. Financial setbacks required adjusting my lifestyle. In short, much of what I had attached my sense of self and security to was suddenly in flux. It was during this period that I first encountered Stoic philosophy, and its perspective on attachment offered a lifeline. The distinction between what I could and couldn't control gave me a practical framework for navigating uncertainty. The practices we've discussed provided concrete tools for building resilience. Most importantly, I began to recognize how my attachments to particular outcomes were actually limiting me. By clinging to my original life script, I was missing opportunities that didn't fit that narrative. By identifying so strongly with specific roles and achievements, I was constraining my ability to adapt. The process of letting go wasn't immediate or linear. Old attachments reasserted themselves. New ones formed. But gradually, I developed greater flexibility, both mentally and emotionally. What surprised me most was discovering that letting go didn't diminish my engagement with life. It deepened it. Without the filter of rigid expectations, I could see situations more clearly. Without the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable, I had more energy for meaningful action. I share this not because my experience is unique or exemplary, but because it illustrates something the Stoics deeply understood. These principles must be lived to be truly understood. Reading about letting go is one thing. Actually practicing it in the face of real challenges is quite another. the ongoing practice of letting go. As we conclude, I want to emphasize that what we've explored is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice. The Stoics never claimed to eliminate their attachments entirely. Rather, they committed to the daily work of recognizing and loosening them. Marcus Aurelius, despite being Emperor of Rome, still needed to remind himself daily of these principles. His meditations were personal notes written to reinforce his practice, not declarations of perfect mastery. This should encourage us when we struggle. The goal isn't to reach some perfect state of detachment, but to develop greater awareness of our attachments and more skill in working with them. Epictetus captured this perfectly. Make progress every day toward freedom from attachment. No one who is filled with joy and peace depends on externals. The journey toward this inner freedom begins with a simple question we can ask ourselves regularly. What am I gripping tightly right now that I need to hold more lightly? Perhaps it's an expectation about how someone should behave. Maybe it's an identity you've outgrown, but still cling to. It could be a past mistake you keep punishing yourself for, or possibly a future worry that's stealing your present peace. Whatever it is, experiment with loosening your grip on it, not abandoning care, but releasing the demand that reality conform to your preferences. This is the essence of the Stoic approach to attachment. As Seneca wrote, "He is a great man who uses earthenware dishes as if they were silver, but he is equally great who uses silver as if it were earthenware. It is the sign of an unstable mind not to be able to endure riches." This balanced relationship with externals, caring without clinging, preferring without demanding, is what the Stoics offer us. It's a middle path between indifference and unhealthy attachment. I'll leave you with one final thought from Marcus Aurelius that captures the power of letting go. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. By releasing our attachment to specific external conditions for happiness, we reclaim our power to choose our response to whatever circumstances we face. This is the true freedom the Stoics discovered. Not freedom from life's challenges, but freedom in how we meet them. Thank you for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in these ideas, I encourage you to experiment with them in your own life. The true test of any philosophy isn't how good it sounds, but how well it works when applied. Let me know in the comments which of these principles resonates most with you, or share your own experience with letting go as a source of strength. And if you'd like to dive deeper into Stoic philosophy, I've included some recommended readings in the description below. Until next time, practice holding life a little more lightly, and watch how that lightness might actually become your greatest strength.